My name is Talmadge Heflin. I'm the director of the Center for Fiscal Policy at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And we're here today to talk about cities held hostage by state statute in their public pension plans. Now, I'll say up front, there are some of the plans that work great. There are some of the plans that the cities and the employee groups totally agree on, for the most part, at least where they are today. But I'm here to tell you that had the cities known what was going to happen down toward the end of the road, or as they progressed, it's my guess they would have been much more vigorous in their objection to putting the pension plans in state statute. Because as it exists today, at least in 7 of our cities, that there's some component where they're held hostage and not be able to make changes that might be able to fit their ability to pay. And so it's our contention that the people that are held hostage are the taxpayers. It's not to say that we don't want to see employees compensated properly or have proper pension systems, but it is our contention that if there's a pension system out there that allows a retiree to draw in excess of what they made when they were working, that's not a sustainable model. And so we're seeing all over the country where state pension systems and local pension systems are in situations to where there is no way they can be sustained over the long haul. There's billions of dollars of unfunded liability, and we believe that the people paying the bill should have access to all the data, and they should, their governing body, their legislative body, in most cases, city councils and the mayor, should have the ability to manage that system with their employee groups. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We've got a great panel, very knowledgeable panel, and I'll introduce them all, and then I'll ask them all to come and make their comments, and then we will have some questions from you all. We have City Councilman Pete Constant from San Jose, California. Councilman Constant was elected to the council in June 2006 and re-elected in June 2010. And as you know, San Jose is the capital of the Silicon Valley, 10th largest city in the U.S., and we're glad that you're with us today. We have Craig Mason, City of Houston. He's currently providing consulting services for the City of Houston relative to 3 pension systems, and I believe he sits on the board of trustees of those three systems. We have another elected official, Mayor Betsy Price from the City of Fort Worth, was elected as the 44th mayor of the City of Fort Worth in 2011 and has focused on fiscal responsibility, creating a stronger economy through public-private partnerships and strengthening neighborhoods through faith-based and citywide health engagement initiatives. Then we have Larry Reed, a person that has worked as an employee and a retiree, but has really helped manage the Fire and Police Pension Fund for San Antonio and knows the systems. He's a retired firefighter, captain, represents the retired firefighters as a trustee on the Fire and Police Pension Fund. He served as an active firefighter trustee and also executive director of the funds. So I'm expecting a good lively discussion, and hopefully somewhere within those discussions we'll be able to see some solutions start percolating to the top. And we may even hear where the systems as they are today are just fine. That's okay. That's what we're here for, to discuss. Councilman Constant.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the city of San Jose as a case study, because we have been dealing with our pension issue for a number of years. And to set the context, I want to say up front that we have tried to make this not about taxpayers versus employees or about the elected officials versus the unions. And from my perspective, I've been able to see this situation unfold over a number of years. I'm also a former police officer who was employed by the city of San Jose, who was one of the police union board of directors back in the 90s. I serve as a trustee on 2 different pension funds, and I'm actually working on my doctorate right now, researching pensions. So looking at this from a number of perspectives, including the perspective that I'm going to talk about today, which is how we went through our pension reform, and I had the fortunate experience of being one of the co-authors of our legislation. So the city of San Jose, as was mentioned, is a big city. We have an operating budget, annual budget of about $3 billion a year. And that's for all 3 of our major categories, the special funds, the enterprise funds, and our general fund. Our general fund budget has varied between about $1.2 billion a year and is down to about just under $900 million a year because of the economic situation. So we see ourselves with significant liabilities, and you can see here in the slide going from 2010 to 2011, and the new numbers we just got a week ago for our 2012 debt just related to our pension system. It's $1.8 billion of unfunded liability for a system in a city where we only have 5,000 employees. So we're not talking about a state system. Oftentimes you see these numbers, you're seeing large counties, small states seeing these type of numbers. We have our retiree health care liability that is fortunately just starting to subside a little because of some of the actions we've taken, which I'll go over in a little bit. But we're seeing that our unfunded liabilities related to all of our pension liabilities, both health care and pension, are 3 times plus our general fund. And that has caused a serious issue. We've been through a period now for 11 years of budget deficits. And keeping in mind again that our general fund is just under $900 million now, we over this 10-year period had to work to resolve a cumulative deficit that has been over $500 million. So we are operating with significantly less cost per employee, dollars per employee to pay, less money per resident to provide services. Our retirement costs have simply just been skyrocketing. In a 10-year period, the contributions that just came out of the city's checkbook went from $73 million to $245 million in 10 years. That's a lot when you see that, and it's projected to go higher, which I'll get into in a couple of slides. But what really illustrates the issue is when you look at our number of employees. We have 2,000 fewer employees over a period of 10 years, but triple the pension obligations. And again, that contribution I showed was just the pension, not the healthcare side. To illustrate in one department, the police department, and I always use that as an illustration since I was in the police department. When I left the police department in the middle of 2000, as we entered the 2001 budget cycle, we were spending $203 million a year with almost 1,900 full-time employees. 10 years later, spending almost 50% more with 20% less people doing the job. So we went from police officers on the street, these numbers here are all employees, but we went from 1,450 sworn police officers to this last week, we just dropped below 1,000 sworn police officers in our city. As we look forward, the number is just going to continue to rise. Based on the most recent projections that we just got last week, by around the year 2025, we'll be spending somewhere just shy of $400 million a year just in pension contributions. So we looked at this and said we simply can't do it. 2 budget years ago, we had a $118 million deficit. The year before, it was over a $100 million deficit. We continued to cut services to pay our bills. We went from having somewhere around 40-something community centers throughout our city to having 10, 1 in each district. Our libraries are only open half of the week We have fire stations that are closed, and we have brownouts that roll throughout our city. We tried dynamic deployment where we're shifting resources all the time. We just continue to try and do as much as we can for our population of nearly 1 million with less and less money. So we got together and said we need to do something about this. Everybody agreed. Everybody from Joe or Jane average employee to the union leadership to the city council to the taxpayers, everyone agreed we had a crisis. What we couldn't agree on is how to move forward. So I'm going to go through with kind of where we were, where we are, as quickly as I can here. So just as a framework, these are what our pension benefits are. And at the end, I'll give you a website link so you can get the whole PowerPoint. But basically, our public safety can retire with 90% at 50 years old, non-public safety, 75% at 55 years old. The employees pay 27% of the normal cost, which you know is the cost of providing the actual pension benefit for this year and going forward. And the city pays 73% of the cost. However, the city picks up 100% of the unfunded liability. So that $3 billion bill you saw is all the responsibility of the taxpayers. The final average salary is based on the highest rolling 12-month average. So if you have pay concessions like we just did, where our employees take a pay reduction so that we didn't have to do layoffs, their retirement is still based on their higher salary that they earned before the cuts. A guaranteed 3% cost of living adjustment every year in retirement, which are eligible the day you retire. So if you retire on February 1st and the cost of living adjustment comes on February 28th of every year, you get that 3% cost of living right away. And then 100% family health coverage, premium paid by the city for all retirees. So when we looked at this, we said, oh, and by the way, just so you can have a framework of salaries, our sworn police and firefighters, after the 10% pay reductions that we just went through in our last budget negotiations, their pay after the 10% is about $109,000 a year. A secretarial position, administrative assistant, is about $70,000 a year in the city of San Jose. And I know the salaries are different based on where you are in the country and cost of living, and San Jose is a very high cost of living area. So our pension reform ballot measure had 3 categories: how we deal with new employees, how we deal with current employees, and how we deal with current retirees. The new employees were the simplest, or at least we thought so. Created a new tier of benefit for new employees going forward. We reduced the formula, increased retirement age, went to a 3-year average salary, shared equally in the cost of providing the benefit, both in a normal cost perspective and an unfunded liability, and we changed the cost of living adjustments to CPI adjustment for our Bay Area CPI. We have this implemented for our non-public safety employees. We have not yet been able to implement it on our public safety employees. For current employees, we told our current employees through this ballot measure, you can keep everything that you've accrued. The law is clear that once you've accrued it, the benefit's yours. And you can continue to accrue it if you'd like, but we have to increase your contribution rates because we simply can't keep closing down services because, quite frankly, you're gonna look to your right and look to your left and pick which one of your coworkers is gonna get laid off because we just simply don't have the money. So we said that we would start sharing in the cost of unfunded liability, that it would be no more than 16% of pay, and we would phase it in over 4 years. And that if for any reason the courts disallow increase in contributions, then there would be corresponding decreases in compensation to make up for it. We did say that if you don't want to do that, you can opt into the new plan that we've designed for new employees. That you can say, I will keep everything I've banked, my 3% or 4% per year, wherever you are on the scale, but from this point forward, I'm only going to accrue at 2% per year, and then we gradually phase in some age increases over time, and no responsibility for the unfunded liability if you choose that. That puts a lot more money in the pockets of our employees and has them work just a little bit longer. For our retirees, we say, obviously you have everything that you have been getting, your retirement check and your cost of living adjustment. But if the city continues to be in dire financial straits and we have to declare a fiscal emergency, and the state of California has an outline or a framework for fiscal emergencies, if we do that, then the City Council has the option to reduce or suspend cost of living adjustments for a defined period of time or until the fiscal emergency lapses. We also have made changes to the definition of disability and codified an agreement we made with our unions to share in the cost of the unfunded health care liability. We went to the voters. The voters overwhelmingly approved this measure with about a 69% approval rating. And if you look, we have 10 council districts in our city. The least approval rate was 57, the highest being 76%. Just happens to be my district. But it was a very definitive approach or a response from our residents. Now I know that these numbers sometimes don't have context, so just if you think about it as a cost of payroll, and I know we have people here in private business and people here who work in government, right now our contribution rates between employees and employer combined just for pension is over 80% of payroll for public safety and about 70% of payroll for non-public safety. And when we fully index our healthcare contributions, it's about 37%. So add that together, you're talking 125% of payroll to deal with our liabilities. It's huge. Now, it's working. We already got our numbers. This is how you can get the information. You can write that down as I'm wrapping up because I'm getting the hook here. We got our numbers for our new tier for non-public safety employees, and the contribution rates for our new employees under the new plan will plummet from what we're paying now, nearly 60% of payroll, down to 6.68%, and the employee's contribution will go down from 11% to 6.68%. So huge amount of savings in the general fund for both, and assurance going forward that we share in the liability. And that's a very important thing, the risk sharing on the unfunded liability, because that creates a great incentive for the retirement boards to be a little more conservative in their projections, more realistic in their assumption rates to keep the costs down and to make sure that we don't create future unfunded liabilities. My time's up, but I'll be around for questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we apologize for the horn.
As soon as they stop, those thousands of people will rush off the train.
All right, well, I'm from the city of Houston, and as Talmadge said, I'm a consultant to the city, and part of my duties is trustee on all three of the pension systems there. I'm going to concentrate on the statutory framework in which the city of Houston's pension systems operate, because I think that's what sort of created the challenges that face the city of Houston. So basically there are three separate plans, one covering the civilian employees, one for the firefighters, and one for the police. The administration of those plans is outsourced to three separate independent trust organizations. And those organizations are established and governed by state statute. Their main functions are to manage the plan's investments and pay the benefits when they're due. So where I think the problem comes in is that the description of the benefits, that is the plan design, how much is paid to the members, is included in the state statute. And what that does is it removes, see, I think the total compensation relationship ought to be between an employer and the employee. This removes the pension element of total compensation, just one element, not cash, not health benefits, not paid time off. It removes that from that employee-employer relationship and puts it in the hands of an entity that is probably largely disinterested and with little or no knowledge of the total compensation program at the city. Now, two of the systems, the statutes, the municipal, that's HMEPs, and the police, HPOPs, have the ability to trump state statute through meet and confer. That's kind of a good thing. That brings it down closer to the employer-employee relationship. But in Houston, it's created a situation where the trustees of the pension systems, who are also beneficiaries, there's a little bit of an inherent conflict of interest there. And in Houston, through those negotiations and through personalities too, I must admit, there seems to be a never-ending, somewhat adversarial relationship between the plan sponsor, the city, and the plan administrators, the pension boards. The firefighter statute does not permit meet and confer. So the only way to make changes to the benefits in the firefighters is to amend the state statute. Pension benefits are considered separately from other parts of the compensation. And I think that's created some of the problems. When you have pension benefits and take the police and the municipal, those pension boards can negotiate with the city and agree on pension benefits separate from other elements of compensation. I mean, we as trustees, we are told our most important decision is how to allocate the investment dollars to the different investment categories. So we as trustees wouldn't like someone telling us, okay, but this asset category, you know, we're going to tell you what to do there, and you can deal with the other things. So what the city has is the city is responsible with their employees on the allocation of compensation dollars. And so there's a lack of coordination and correlation between the pension benefit dollars and the other compensation dollars. The final thing is the actuary who advises on the funding levels, funding obligations, reports to the plan administrator, that is the pension boards, rather than the city, which is the plan sponsor that bears the risks of the funding obligations. So just to give you an idea of the size or the compensation of the pension boards, you have some elected trustees who are beneficiaries, and then you have a few appointees. The main message here is that these are heavily weighted in favor of beneficiaries. These numbers are a little bit outdated, but just to give you an idea of the sizes of the pension systems in terms of number of employees, members, size of the staff of the administrative organization, the operating expenses of each of the administrative organizations, and the value of assets. Now those assets have grown a little bit. These are a little bit old. I was lazy. The actuarial, we get these numbers from the actuarial reports. The 2012 reports all haven't been completed yet, so I just did not update them. All right, if I had one slide to show you, this is the one I would show you. This is where the challenge became apparent at the City of Houston. In 2001, and by challenge, I looked it up in the dictionary just to make sure I was using the right word, a stimulating task or problem. So what we have in Houston is a stimulating task or problem. And that arose when, in 2001, all three plans were able to negotiate some benefit increases, and the impact, the financial impact on the city, the future funding obligations, were totally misunderstood. Nobody at the city, in my opinion, I came on board in 2005, but nobody at the city anticipated that these funding levels would increase dramatically. For example, the red line, can you see the red? Yeah. The red line, you know, for the decade of the 90s, this is the municipal plan, decade of the 90s was rocking along, everything was fine, and the city was contributing about 10% of payroll. These benefit increases were adopted and implemented in the state statute on the basis that the increases would increase that 10% of contribution, 10% of payroll, to 15% of payroll. Well, you can see what happened. It actually increased to 53% of payroll. That's pretty major. Similar things happened at the firefighters and the police system. The city contributions pretty much doubled from the 15% range, 15% of payroll range to 30% of payroll range. So all of these were based on a misunderstanding of the actual the funding impact on the city, but they were embedded now in the state statute. So the interesting, stimulating task or problem with the city is how to deal with this. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over each one of these specifically. I want to get to what the city has attempted to do and where it stands now. If you'd like, if anybody likes copies of the whole presentation, I'm sure we can figure out how to get them to you. So what I want to concentrate on is how has the city addressed this challenge? Well, the challenge became apparent, the enormity of the challenge became apparent in the fall of 2003 when the current mayor, at that time, Lee Brown, was leaving office at the end of 2003. And the new mayor, Bill White, was coming on board in 2004. So the new mayor, Mayor White, sort of inherited this challenge. What he did was, at the same time, there was a proposed amendment to the state constitution that would prohibit cities, local municipalities, from reducing accrued benefits, that is, benefits earned to date, unless the city had a general election and the citizens of the city said, we don't want that provision to apply to us. And so he orchestrated this general election in May of 2004, and the citizens of Houston opted out of that state constitutional provision. So in effect, I guess the city is at least with regard to the state constitution, has the ability to reduce accrued benefits. They haven't done that yet. Nobody wants to do that, so they haven't done that. He also formed a task force of business leaders to sort of see what they can do to address this issue. And one of the things they did was to recommend this position that I'm holding now called Chief Pension Executive at the city, so that this misunderstandings that happened because of the 2001 benefit increases wouldn't happen again. I have an actuarial background. I retired as an actuarial consultant. And so my job there basically is to communicate to all stakeholders what the issues are, so hopefully prevent any future misunderstandings about what the impact of certain decisions. I hope I'm doing okay on that. But the other thing he did was he and the municipal board, pension board, and the police pension board acknowledged this was a problem, and they met with the city through the meet and confer process and agreed to do some things, primarily to reduce future benefits and to adopt a schedule of future city contributions. There were some things that were done after that in each case. There were some additional meet and confer agreements at the municipal plan. They adopted a whole new benefit structure for employees hired after January 2008. The police had adopted a new pension structure for police officers hired after October 2004. So you have two-tiered systems there. And at the firefighters, nothing has been done because the meet and confer is not available and have been able to make any changes in the state statute. So, final slide. So where do we stand now? Which I call the current dilemma. Current dilemma is that the city contribution rates for fiscal year 2013 are 23.5% of payroll for the municipal plan. Those employees are also covered by Social Security, so if you add the Social Security, the city's obligation there is 29.7% of payroll. Police 32.7% and the firefighters 26.9% of payroll. Those rates are projected to increase over the next several years. And those rates, by the way, are based on an assumption that the assets are going to earn 8.5%. So those rates, and some people might consider those rates to be a little optimistic in the first place. but anyway, even with 8.5%, they're projected an increase. And the city administration deems those rates and the projected increases to be unsustainable. And again, they're a result of prior decisions to increase benefits based on flawed analyses of the future city funding obligations. Two of the funds have collaborated to establish sustainable future benefits for their future and recently hired members. But the security benefits, because of the city's inability to make the contributions, is still in jeopardy. And right now, so the city is unable to achieve its goal of secure, sustainable benefits for all employees without support from the state legislature or the pension boards. My time is up. Right on time, right? So,
Good job.
thank you.
Well, I'm going to give you a break from PowerPoints. I figure after 2 or 3 and how many you've had this last couple of days. So I'm just going to talk to you, and I just may have shut somebody's down. But just a little bit about Fort Worth and where we found ourselves. We are not as held hostage as most cities to the state statute. We operate under a slightly different one. Our makeup of our board is the same, but we have an exception that Fort Worth can, in the statute, define the benefits for our employee. And we are committed to local control. We believe that that benefit between our employees and the council is where it must stay, and between our local taxpayers is where we should be. San Jose is an interesting case study. We found ourselves headed down the same slippery slope and committed beginning about 6 years ago to make some changes. I hate to say it, but I'm glad we're not in that shape that you found yourself. We do have a lot of the same situations that Houston has because the state statute does control the makeup of the board and several of the other features. In the 90s, Fort Worth is the 16th largest city in the nation, 4th, 5th in the state, depending on where you see the numbers ranked as to what we are now. And I did say we are a slightly different statute, but in the 90s we saw major increased pension benefits that became, as we moved into this downturn in the mid-2000s, unsustainable. And we began to see that happen as we put more and more. So Fort Worth began chipping away at their pension issues with negotiations about 6 years ago. I think 4 years ago, the general fund employees were changed so that they're different, all their new ones. Fire was changed in the last negotiation, Jim, for new ones, I believe, and police is also. And this past October, the council took the bold step after looking at all the numbers and realizing that it was not sustainable where we found ourselves headed. The goal is we want all of our employees to be able to have the pension when they retire, what they've put in. We have never made a change to anybody's accrued benefits, nor do we ever intend to do that. But we found ourselves addressing a $740 million liability and growing. By some of the accounts, it was a $1 billion liability or more and growing in a city whose budget is an annual budget of about $1.3 billion. It's too big. We sued. We went in and made changes for our current employees going forward. The original date, we changed. Our employees were allowed to have overtime in their calculations for their pensions. We have a drop program, and the drop program benefits us greatly. That can freeze their pension and then take the next 5 years, and when they retire at the end of 5 years, they get a lump sum. But that keeps us from having to bring in a lot of new ones, so we didn't want to touch our drop. But the overtime program and an ad hoc COLA, we found ourselves facing this big liability. So we went in, and our police officers are meet and confer. Our fire is union, and our general fund employees are, as somebody said, just subject to the whim of the council because of that. So we made major changes to our pension plan. We took the overtime out. We raised it from a high 3 to a high 5. The assumed rate that our board uses is 8 1/4. We made our projections based on a 7.5%, and we will have an experience study due this year from our board. And it looks like those changes will be applied to everyone. We're still in the middle of negotiations with fire, so we don't know where that'll be, but as it stands right now, there'll be all employees, general and police, going forward. After we made the changes, we sued for a declaratory judgment because there's an attorney general ruling that has been interpreted several different ways, one of them being that you cannot change future benefits for existing employees. We do not believe that to be the case, nor do our attorneys, so we have a current open lawsuit, so I can't comment a whole lot about that. But the city has doubled their contribution to the pension plan since the year '07. We've added $78 million a year to our pension plan. And yet we found ourselves losing ground every year in that unfunded liability. The taxpayers put in 20% of our payroll goes directly to pension. That's a substantial amount in a city that's growing and has major infrastructure needs. We wanted our employees to have a bigger vested interest in this game, and we wanted our taxpayers. We want to continue to attract businesses. Iowa and Illinois have both found themselves, and I'm sure San Jose to a certain extent, in the situation, businesses coming in, bringing new jobs for our younger generation and our existing employees, are looking at the health of cities now, something they've not done in the past. But one of the questions they ask you is, tell us about your unfunded liabilities. And the liability we're talking about today is strictly pension, not health care. Both of those have a big impact on the health of the city. And it became very apparent that we had to get sustainable if we wanted to continue to grow. We made those changes and we ended up in this lawsuit. And one of the changes that we also made was to change the ad hoc COLA, because our ad hoc COLA had a peculiar provision that it only pays on the health of the fund. And we changed it to the employees can select. The determination now is that they won't get a COLA paid for 22 years at the rate the fund is now. So as part of our changes, we've gone back and given them the ability to accept a 2% guaranteed COLA every year. The 7.5 that we're assuming on the rate is more than fair. We always say, can you get that kind of money on your investments? Most of us cannot. The 8.25 the board is using, we believe, will be lowered this year with their experience study. It's still an extremely rich plan in comparison to many other cities. It's a very good plan. It's a defined benefit plan. Council is committed to keeping the defined benefit plan. One thing that this council really is committed to is local control. I said it to start out with, but we truly believe that this is an issue for local government who knows how many police officers we need, how many fire we need, how many general fund officers we need, who knows what their tax base will bear, knows what their citizens will bear, and who knows where our business's pressure point is. We will soon know, hopefully, the outcome of our lawsuit, and that will help us. But the pension health fund is fundamental to the health of the city. It's all about jobs and economic prosperity for us. New jobs, nervous taxpayers with a huge liability. We just simply had to face it. The risk management must be handled, and it can't be kicked down the street anymore. I've been in office 19 months now, and council had whittled away by increasing contributions and changing new employees and still saw it slipping. And the election that I ran in, it was clearly a referendum that they wanted the city to handle its budget issues and, along with the budget, to handle this pension issue, the growing liability. So Fort Worth's focus for our plan is that it's predictable for everyone concerned, that it's affordable for taxpayers, it's sustainable for our employees, it's transparent in its liabilities, and that's where this COLA comes in. With the ad hoc COLA, the estimates on the liability did not include a payment on the COLA. So it potentially could have jumped up millions more, and that it's fair and equitable for all employees. Our employees deserve a fair pay and a sustainable pension. Likewise, our taxpayers and our citizens who elect us deserve it to be fair and balanced and used efficiently. We're committed to working on that with the help of those of you who are in the legislature and all of the others. We believe if the control is left at the local level, you will see major changes that will benefit everyone. So the message for legislators in the room is that local officials are elected to make local decisions. Texas has a long track record of doing the right thing. States should not have their hands tied or the hands of cities should not be tied on our local issues because we're accountable to our local taxpayers. We've addressed our pension issues head on We will wait and see what the courts do with us, and I'm proud of what Fort Worth has done. And the state has worked hard on many issues, but I really do believe that this is a case, Talmadge, where our hands are often tied, and we're in much better position if we're allowed to work with our employees. So thank you for being here.
Can you do it without a PowerPoint? Can you do it without a PowerPoint?
We didn't get it?
She shut the computer down and I don't know the password. Let me try to.
Yeah,
let me try to
no, I
find
can
it.
do it. Okay, technical difficulties. Is it back up? Oh. Okay, well, if you haven't figured it out, I'm the one being led to slaughter here. Okay, there always has to be one. But let me just say, as Talmadge mentioned, I am a retired captain with the San Antonio Fire Department. I have been involved with the pension fund for over 25 years. I like to say that I've been in the trenches. My experience is practical and not theoretical, so been there and done that. We've all seen and read and heard the stories about defined benefit pension plans, and we've heard stories here today that they're no longer sustainable, the tremendous unfunded liabilities that are out there. And I would submit to you that this is not the typical situation that is out there. These are the outliers out there. Particularly in Texas, we don't have the problems of the magnitude that you see in Illinois and California and the New Jerseys and et cetera. We've all seen those in the paper, the news, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most Texas funds have been around for decades, and they are sustainable for the long term. Those that do have problems, several of them have addressed their issues, or beginning to address their issues, and are working on them. I think Fort Worth's an example of that. But I'm here, they asked me to tell you the story of San Antonio. That's the fire and police. We are a combined fund there. And I'm going to come at this from where we were and where we are now. I'm going to begin in 1985 for a couple of reasons. To administer a defined benefit pension plan, it is a long-term situation. It is a marathon and not a sprint that we are running. The second reason is that's when I was elected to the board, so I have firsthand knowledge of it. Pull up the first chart, would be fine.
You stop the time.
Well, let me go ahead. Can y'all hear me? Okay. 1985. Oh, I'm sorry. 1985. Our fund was approximately $129 million, and our unfunded liability was $244 million, which is almost double, and that is a problem. The time to pay off our unfunded liability was listed as infinity, which means you're not going to pay that off. Today, our fund is $2.2 billion, and our liabilities are not double that. They are, in fact, $250 million, very similar to what they were in 1985. Our members do not contribute to Social Security. And our years to pay off our unfunded liability currently stands at 9 years under the current fund structure. Our board is governed by a 9-member board, 3 police officers, 3 firefighters, and 3 representatives from the city. We provide retirement, line of duty, death, and disability benefits for over 6,000 police officers, firefighters, retirees, and their families. Our payroll that we pay out in checks is approximately $100 million, which is an economic boost to the San Antonio economy, believe me. A little bit about the fund. Our assumed rate of return is 7.5%. We just recently lowered that. 60% of our benefits are derived from investment income. Our average age of retirement is 55 years old with 30 years of service. And our average monthly payment is $3,700. Our life expectancy, and this is from an experience study, is 74.5 years versus the general population of 77.9 years. And let me go to the chart here. This is the growth of the pension fund assets, basically from 1986 to 1985. I'm sorry. I got a copy here. Let me look at that. As you can see over that time period, and there are ups and downs, as we all know, there are economic up and downs in the economy, but that 25-year return average is 8.6%. Now currently we are at 7.5. We recently reduced that from 7.75. But I want you to focus on the years 2001 through basically 2009 in that time period. This 9-10-year time period is where I'm going to say the pundits mainly focus. What we had there was what's called the tech crash, which I guess that's San Jose's fault. Yeah, in the early 2000s, and then the Great Recession that we've just been through, 2008, 2009. Which was tremendous. I mean, we lost Lehman Brothers, almost AIG, a lot of, the banks, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the financial system in this country almost crashed. And so that does include those 2 economic periods there. These are our 30-year number is 10.1%. These are our return numbers. Our 20-year number is 8.3, 10-year 7.6, 5-year 1.3, 3-year 8.4, and then this past year, although this is unaudited, but we did close our books September 30th, is 13.4%. The next slide, this is the history of our unfunded liability. And as you can see, in 1986, starting out, it was 63%. And so through the years, it's gone up and down, but we have gradually increased that. The last 5 years, 6-7 years, we're hovering right at the high 80s and low 90s. So we are very well funded. I do want to point out, as a percent of budget, 1985, the city contributions were about $13 million. 2011, they were $67 million. Now, I will tell you, in 1985, if we would have talked about the city having to contribute that amount of money, everybody would have been scared. But this is all based on payroll growth, inflation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can talk some real big numbers here. But understand where they came from. Our expense compared to the expenditures of the city budget, we're in the high 3s as a percentage is what is paid into the payroll. I mean paid into the pension fund as far as contributions. Okay, how am I doing here? I'm going to have to shorten this, I hate to tell you. I'm doing real good, right? Y'all don't want me to shorten it? 5 minutes? Okay. So how did we do this? How do we make these changes? And it is a long-term plan that you have to incorporate. Whatever you do today, it takes a while to run through the system. In fact, it takes years. And I'm going to shorten this a little bit. But basically, we increased contributions. Okay, between 87 and 1989, contributions were increased 1.5% of payroll. That's between employee and employer. And beginning in 1990, each year, the employee contributed an additional 0.16%, the city 0.32%. So for almost 0.5% for each of the next years up until the year 2000. Currently, the employee puts in 12.32%, and the city double matches that number. So we have a healthy contribution rate. And they have been doing that since the year 2000. One of the critical things about this, and I hope everybody takes this to heart, this is level funding. This is month after month, year after year. We don't have a good year and reduce contributions. We don't have a bad year and go over what we normally would have. This is every year, year after year. We think this is critical to the success of a defined benefit pension plan. We also made adjustments to our COLA. We used to pay 100% COLA. We changed that to a 75% COLA, simply meaning if the inflation rate was 4%, the retirees would receive a 3% raise. Now, this is one of the most costly benefits that we provide. Anybody involved in pension funds knows that COLA costs are tremendous. But this is factored into our plan, and we are and have been able to pay it, as you can see. Our 1989 retirees and prior to that, they do receive 100% COLA. We do not calculate overtime into our benefit calculations, and our benefits are based on the high 3 years of the last 5. In addition, we do something unique in San Antonio. From what I've seen with most pension plans, we have a graduated benefit schedule. And basically for each of the first 1 through 20 years that you work, you earn a 2.25% benefit. And that's 45% total at 20 years. Each of the next 7 years, you would earn a 5% benefit, and that gives you an 80% pension. Each of the next 3 years, it's 2%, and 0.5% for each of the next 3 years. So that gives you an 87.5% pension. That is the maximum. I don't care how many years that you do, 87.5% is the absolute maximum. What this does is this is an incentive for about a 30-year, 32-year firefighter or police officer, which we think is about correct. We really don't want 65-year-old police officers chasing burglars. Okay, let me, real quickly, they're giving me a sign here. I will say that San Antonio and our fund, and it's to my knowledge the city, because we have not heard anything different from them, are in favor of state statute. We are in state statute. We have been. We've made these changes in state statute, and we feel like it provides the checks and the balances and actually the pension expertise to the State Pension Review Board that is necessary to administer a defined benefit pension plan. I'm going to make a comment about Fort Worth, and please excuse me, nothing personal. Okay. But the example of local control in a pension system that I'm aware of and in my history has been Fort Worth. It's not until recently that they were in state statute at all. And I know during the 90s, a lot of changes were made in their plans. Contributions went down. They may have given raises in the form of lessening contributions to the employees. Actuarial assumed rates were changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To me, Fort Worth, during that period of time, is the poster child of why you don't have local control. I'm sorry. That's just the way we see it and how I've lived it. The other one is the city of Houston. That seems to be ground zero here. I think they are in favor of local control down there. Seems to us in the state that that's kind of a local political fight going on down there, and we urge them to work that out. We don't feel we need legislation in the local control area or really any other area. We feel like the system in place today in Texas works. So with that, and I'm getting the hook, oh, I got 30 seconds. I did. Time. With that, I want to thank the foundation for inviting me and the audience for attending. Any questions or whatever, I will be available afterwards. Some of our trustees are here, and executive director is here. And if you want to talk pensions, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Now, you can see why we had Mr. Reed to, as he put it, the lamb led to the slaughter, and it took 3 people to equal him, because I had heard the San Antonio story before, and we don't refute that it appears to be a good system, one that has evolved with the employee groups and the cities. And so we know that there's systems around the state that are good, and there are some that are struggling. And we get back to the point that we believe the best government is closest to the people, and the local folks have the people to change their legislative body, being their city councils, if they think things are not going as they should be. And so, at any rate, you've heard the stories and the facts. We believe that there should be devolution back to the local cities for control, and at this time we can take a few questions. So if you have questions of any of the panelists or all of them. Yes, sir.
I'm still confused about the Houston story. I understood that the state statute allows opt-out by election. Houston, I believe I heard you, Mr. Mason, say that has opted out, and so what is the problem?
No, is this on?
Yeah.
The opt-out I mentioned was opting out of a state constitutional provision that would prohibit local municipalities from reducing accrued pension benefits. So the city opted out of that provision. That meaning the city has, I'm not a lawyer, but the city apparently has the ability to reduce accrued benefits. They haven't done it yet.
Why is that?
Well, because in order to do it, they have to go through the state legislature or the pension boards, and they get no cooperation from either one of those entities. So they're limited in doing what they can do by state statute and the pension boards in the case of meet and confer. You need state statute, yes, approval to reduce benefits, to do anything, to make any change in benefits.
Other questions? No.
Except for the 2 that have meet and confer that can trump that, but that's just almost as difficult as the state statute.
I'd like to ask, we've kind of seen at the local level, the state level, and even at the federal level that governments have a tendency when times are robust and we're in expansionary times, that they don't do a very good job of correcting what happens during contractionary times. As we saw up on the chart, it looked like that there were, even from San Jose, who said that you've had budget deficits now for 11 years. Back in the 90s, times were booming. I'm kind of curious, have any of the governments, when you look back, I'm sure you had unfunded liabilities then, did you utilize those times when you had excess surplus revenues to pay down some of those liabilities, or did you opt to reduce your contributions into these pensions?
So the city of San Jose paid the full annual required contribution every year, except for 2. One year it was 98%, the other year it was 97%, and that was because of errors in the bill being given to them. But what happens in our area is in the good times, significant raises are given, and just in the period from 2010 to 2011, those raises for police and fire were about 50% of payroll over that decade. But then in the years that were not good, no raises were given, but benefit enhancements were given because the elected officials figured, well, we don't have to pay for that right now. So every year it was like a one-way valve. Things kept going up, and people either didn't realize or didn't care that the two are not additive, they're multiplying. So if you you raise pay by 52% and you raise the pension by 10%, it in effect doubles the retirement dollar amount in the employee's pocket when they retire. So it was all of that happened to us.
But I guess when you say I paid 100% of the annual required contribution, did you lower the annual required contribution instead of maintaining it and paying off that unfunded liability? Paying 100% but decreasing what's required is still
so. In California, we don't have that option. Our pension boards have the state constitutional authority to set all contribution rates, and government must fund whatever is sent to them. Now, some get around it and just underfund it. The city of San Jose never did. So we paid 100% of the normal costs plus whatever the amortization of unfunded liabilities were. And at one point, our police and fire fund did hit 100% funded during that time period.
We have a lady right over here.
My question is to Mr. Reed, and it's probably for you a very basic question. My question is, I believe that I did hear you say that your people do not contribute to Social Security.
That's correct.
Okay. In your 25 years, have you found that to be a common practice for fire and police departments across the nation? And because in my mind, I am trying to think of how that practice would impact the Social Security system, period, not just for your constituents.
I think it's
Mr. Reed, would you speak into the mic, please, so we can get it recorded? Thank you.
You're always getting after me, Council. I think it's pretty safe to say that most police and fire funds do not pay into Social Security. How it would impact Social Security, I don't know. You would add more people to the Titanic, I guess. I mean, if you want to talk flawed pension or benefit systems, you're talking Social Security, and I guarantee you, police and fire don't want in it.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Well,
Ours don't pay in Fort Worth either. None of ours, not general fund or police or fire or Social Security.
So in both of these cities, the firemen and the police department, when they do retire, their retirement funds and their retirement situation is based solely on what the city contributes plus what they contribute to their retirement.
That's exactly correct.
Unless they've worked elsewhere and are eligible to draw Social Security under someone else or some other employer.
well,
That would be kind of interesting to find out how that would impact Social Security in a general sense across the nation, because that would be a substantial number of employees for each state.
I can tell you that I think studies have probably been done, and I mean, I was also involved with our union for a number of years, and they did try and have, over a long period of time, tried to get public employees into Social Security, and it's been a political fight. But I think it would shore it up maybe for a little while, but it's still a sinking ship. I just don't see the logic in that.
and thank goodness we're talking, we're out of time, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to close it down. Lunch is fixing to start. But thank goodness we're talking state pension systems, not federal. That's a whole nother story, and we're not about to take that one on. If you have an evaluation form, if you'd take the time to fill it out and leave it over here on the table. And there's also a handout over there. James Quintero is holding it up. If you'd like one, please take it on the way out. Help me thank the panel for coming and participating. And we're dismissed.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.